Sam Seder on the Majority Report with Emma Vigeland. Joining us now, Jacob Sugarman, lifestyle editor at the Buenos Aires Herald and writer at The Nation magazine. Jacob, welcome back to the show. I know that you spoke with Emma, I guess it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Emma, why don't you start in on this in terms of the Argentinian election? At that point, we didn't know the result, and now we do.
Well, we were more optimistic when we last spoke, Jacob, I guess, in late October. Just keep us up, or I guess update us on what happened after Milei underperformed in the first round of the elections, and there was hope potentially that the centrists would be able to take it over the finish line. And yet, no, the crazy Javier Milei will be the new leader of Argentina.
Right. So when we spoke in, I think it was in October, Emma, this was a few days after the general election. And I think it was either the next day or 2 days after our conversation, there was sort of a mass coalescing of the right-wing coalitions in Argentina around Milei. Patricia Bullrich, who was the Juntos por el Cambio candidate, came out and endorsed Milei formally. He also got an endorsement from Mauricio Macri, who is the former president of Argentina, also of the same kind of ostensibly center-right coalition, although I'm sure that a lot of people would take exception with the characterization of Juntos por el Cambio as center-right. I mean, if Milei weren't a candidate in this election cycle, it would be considered a pretty right-wing party, right-wing group. And basically, you know, all sort of non-Peronist sectors of society ended up basically going to Milei in the runoff election that happened on Sunday, and that's how he ended up not only winning, but winning by, you know, more than 11%, which is a landslide.
Can you walk us through like how much power the president has relative to, let's say, maybe the United States, and like, you know, in his ability to impose his agenda? Because I mean, A, I don't have a good sense of that, but B, does the coalescing of those center-right or right-wing groups around Milei, is that an indication that there's going to be like, there's a similar dynamic to, let's say, Trump and the Republican Party? Like, this is a warm body who's willing to sign off on our agenda. And so give us a sense of both those two questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always reluctant to draw direct comparisons between the United States and Argentina. I mean, they're just two radically different countries with different political makeups, but that's not that far off, truth be told. I think that Milei does not have a majority in Congress. He only has a handful of members from his coalition, which is called La Libertad Avanza, both in the Senate and in the Chamber of Deputies, which is like the House of Representatives for Argentina. But yeah, there are, you know, a large number of members from Juntos por el Cambio, and if they throw their weight behind him, which many of them will if they haven't already, there is reason to expect that he will be able to move forward with a legislative agenda. The president in Argentina has a fair amount of power. He can govern by what's called a DNU. I'm now blanking on the exact Spanish acronym for it, but it's like an executive order. There are limits to it, you know, that would prevent him from eliminating taxes. You know, he's called for a referendum on the legalization of abortion. He would need congressional support to go forward with that. So there are some limits there, but he has a fair amount of power. And if he has the support in Congress, which it appears he does right now, he will be able to govern, or at least I think that is a fair assumption now.
How many parties are in Congress?
Many.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just wanted to sort of like establish that this is not essentially a duopoly. Like, right. I just want to establish like there is an opportunity for him to sew together a coalition, and yes, it explains in some respects why Because it was sort of surprising that there was all of this coalescing around him, I would imagine, relative from the general election.
Yeah, I mean, what you saw within, I mean, Juntos para el Cambio is itself a very kind of interesting group. So to answer your question, there are a number of political parties within Argentina. A lot of them kind of work together as coalitions, as voting blocs. So even within Juntos para el Cambio, you'll have you have PRO, which is a conservative party. You have some more moderate kind of centrist parties, and together they kind of operate under the same banner, Juntos para el Cambio. As to why they coalesced around Milei, I mean, I think a lot of people really kind of cast an anti-Peronist vote. It's not, I think a better analog for this is what happened in Brazil when Bolsonaro won, where there was such a high level of anti-petismo, which is the PT, the kind of left party of Brazil, that was just, this was their vehicle, and they all hopped on board. And, not unlike PT, there's some kind of basic things in common with the Peronist coalition. There's lots of charges of fraud. There's a lot of kind of conception that they are big spenders and using public funds for their own nefarious ends. And, there is truth and great exaggeration to that characterization.
But unlike Brazil, I would say, I mean, based on our last conversation, and we actually had a caller call in yesterday to speak about this, the left in Argentina appears to be anemic and has been for quite a while. I mean, before Bolsonaro, there was Lula, and now there's Lula again, obviously. And then, you can even look over at Boric and say, well, Chile's obviously, their left is clearly more robust. But in Argentina, that hasn't really been the case, is my understanding. Why are those conditions the way that they are?
Well, it depends on how you want to look at the Peronists, which are this sort of chameleon-like coalition that can be sort of anywhere from center-right, which was the case under Menem at the beginning of the century, to more kind of conventionally center-left, which was the case under Nestor Kirchner and to an extent Cristina after him. I'm not sure I would describe it as anemic so much as it's subsumed within this sort of larger coalition. But they have, with the exception of the 4 years in which Mauricio Macri governed, have been in power for decades. And so as Argentina's economy has gone from bad to worse, there is a lot of rage at the kind of governing powers. And that is, the perception is, that is the left, that is the Peronists, that is, they've sort of changed their names constantly. This time around, it was Unión por la Patria. During the last election cycle, it was Frente de Todos. What happened in the previous administration, or the existing administration, the one that's soon to exit, Alberto Fernandez was sort of a hand-picked candidate by Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. He was the chief of staff under her husband, Nestor. And he was kind of meant to be a kind of compromise candidate for sort of the more left wing of the Peronist coalition and the more moderate wing of the coalition. And what ended up happening was a presidency that was neither left wing nor center. It was sort of neither. And it's been, by all metrics, a highly dysfunctional, failed administration. Inflation has exploded. A lot of this wasn't entirely their fault. I mean, they got dealt a pandemic and a war in Ukraine and sort of a succession of horrific events, kind of a historic drought that completely decimated Argentina's exports and emptied out their reserves of dollars. But they've completely failed to contain the damage, and now people are looking to punish them. And Milei has appeared at just the right time.
What I mean, can you walk us through some of the policies that people anticipate that both A, he wants to implement, and B, he's going to be able to? I mean, it really seems like it's a bit of a black box as to what he's going to be able to do, because that's a function of the legislature, which it seems like they coalesce around him for a reason. I guess. I mean, so give us a sense of like what, aside from the fact that he seems to be a lunatic, what is it on a material basis that people are anticipating that he might do?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm kind of reluctant to make any predictions about what he can and can't achieve in office. I think the best way to understand Milei is, he is not a right-wing populist exactly in the tradition of Bolsonaro or Trump. I mean, they share some rhetorical style and flourishes. But Milei is really, kind of a throwback to 90s era kind of, I hate to use this term just because it's thrown around endlessly and, it sort of has been sapped of all meaning, but neoliberalism in South America, where, complete market freedoms and, cutting down the administrative state, as much as humanly possible. A sizable percentage of Argentina's workers are employed by a very large and ample state, and he has pledged to eliminate, 11 separate ministries. He claims that he's going to cut spending by 15% of GDP, eliminate, endless taxes, although it's not entirely clear which he's referring to sometimes. He's also promised to replace Argentina's public education system with a voucher system, although again, details are sparing about exactly what that looks like. He wants to end free public health care. What we've seen in recent weeks is that he shied away from, coming out and saying we're going to privatize Argentina's healthcare system, because I think that would have been electorally, a problem for him. But I'm not really sure that his plan basically doesn't ultimately result in that. I mean, if the idea is that it's no longer a free public service and you have to pay as you go, and Argentina's healthcare system has to compete with the private sector, you're basically handing it over to private companies. How much of that he's going to achieve, I don't know. We'll find out soon enough.
So we should say, when you're saying neoliberal, you're really talking like Mont Pelerin. This is like the pure stuff.
Well, he loves Milton Friedman, right? Yeah, he's praised Milton Friedman in the past or espoused those kinds of economics.
He idolizes the Chicago boys. Hayek is one of his biggest influences. I think he's named his dogs after Austrian economists. I mean, this is where he comes from. Oh, but I'm kind of eager to make that distinction, because it's very easy to say like, Argentina now has this new Trump, and like this is something distinct.
There's more ideology. It seems here in many respects. How do people? When the idea of the Chicago boys coming back in, like, doesn't that, where is the, I don't know, institutional, where is the national sort of memory of, like, is there no sort of visceral reaction to the idea of, Chicago libertarian, University of Chicago libertarians coming in, and what preceded that in terms of 30,000 people disappeared type of situation? Like, is that not what's going on with that?
I mean, these are all good questions. I'm of the mind that Argentina, in my experience living here and reporting from here, is extremely connected to that history and has reckoned with it in ways, that I think other nations who have lived under dictatorships haven't. There are a couple of things to keep in mind. Milei has a lot of support among young voters. I'm talking voters who are 16 to 30 who didn't necessarily live through the crisis of 2001 and certainly weren't alive during the dictatorship from 1976 to 1983.
Young
You
men,
know,
right? Was
lot of
what you
young
said
men.
to me. Right.
Yeah, I mean, he has support amongst a lot of different sectors of society, so I don't want to just assign that group as the ones responsible for electing him. But I think that, people are fed up. And I understand it. You go to the supermarket and like from week to week and sometimes day to day, you see the prices of these things soaring. And, whether they truly believe that what Milei is offering is going to improve their material circumstances, I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I think they want to punish, the people in power, and it's, there seems to be a consensus that the Peronists have to go, and if that has to be Milei, then so be it.
Before we end up having to wrap up with you, I just wanted to touch on some of the weirder elements of Milei as well. Like, is his first lady his sister?
He has said that he would make his first lady, excuse me, that he would make his sister his first lady. He also came out a couple of nights before the election with a list of fake news, one of which is that he felt the need to clarify that he had not fucked his sister. Excuse me, I didn't mean to.
Thank you. Yeah, good to know.
That he felt compelled to tell the public.
I think what you're looking for is made love.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just endless weirdness there. I mean, I'm not immersed in it enough to say any of this with great confidence, but I can tell you what he has come out and said.
Yeah. What is magicide? It's the libertarians and their weird desire to break certain laws for sexual purposes.
There is an overwhelming amount of discourse about pedophilia that lines both what Milei discusses. His vice president has brought up pedophilia at different stages.
There's a long time Dionysus libertarian streak that I think is there, but I want to get back to one more point about this election. Well, in terms of demographically, is Argentina a younger country? I mean, I wonder if 50 years ago, 50 years. Less than 50 years ago, the ushering in of a regime like this, like I say, 30,000 people disappeared. I mean, there was, and who knows the reverberations of something like that. I've never lived through anything like that. But for the sort of the societal memory to have waned enough so that somebody coming in sort of maybe ringing off a couple alarm bells. Is it a younger country? I mean, what?
It is a younger country. I don't have the exact demographic numbers in front of me, so I can't loathe to provide any kind of statistics, but it does skew young. I just, again, in what I have seen and witnessed, and I'm only one reporter, I'm disinclined to say that there is, a lack of memory going on in Argentina, or even a disintegration of memory. I really think it's a testament to how bad conditions are right now, that they are willing to overlook, these very alarming statements he has made about the junta, because they feel like there is no exit, or continuing, the path that the Peronists have laid out would just kind of continue their decline. I happen to think that they're gravely mistaken, and right. I think any number of economists would agree that the proposals that Milei has put forth are only going to hurt Argentina further. But it's something different. I think, as I told Emma in October, when people hear dollarization, I don't know if there's a firm understanding of exactly what that entails, what that means for their personal finances. I think there is a kind of misconception that if they are to start earning in dollars, that this would improve their standard of living. The problem is that Argentina doesn't have the reserves to back up that transition. So the exchange is going to be incredibly punishing, and it's just going to end up, it's going to lead to horrible inflation, mass poverty. There's already, poverty in excess of 40% that would climb. It's gonna be a bloodbath.
And just to be clear on that dynamic, had the Argentinian government had this huge reserve of U.S. dollars, they could circulate those instead of having to go and essentially buy all the dollars to make that type of conversion. And you don't want to be in that position of having to buy all those dollars if you're going to convert your economy, because people are going to charge you a higher rate than because all of a sudden there's a surge in demand.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to make that clear for folks who may not, sort of understand that dynamic of what the lack of reserves to convert. And who knows? Maybe there are people in the government who will say you can't do that, but someone just IM'd us that Milei has cloned his dog 3 times, made a council of advisors
5
out of his
times?
cloned dogs,
5
and,
times?
open to and has named them after Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard, and Robert Lucas.
I stand
Never heard
corrected.
of that one.
They weren't the Austrian economists, but they were.
I guess my point being that this may not be someone who is going to listen to, advice from, standard advisors, economic advisors.
Well, I mean, I think that's what's so scary about this is that he's an ideologue. He is not like Trump and Bolsonaro in this sense. Both of whom would pretty much pursue whatever policy. You could see it in Bolsonaro. I think, I don't want to cite recent Brazilian history that I don't have a firm grasp of, but I think I remember that during the pandemic, he was willing to, spend and hand out checks and keep people afloat. I don't know if someone like Milei would do that because he has his own set of beliefs, and I don't see a lot of compromise there.
Do you think this at the very least is the end of Peronism? I mean, is something new going to come out of this, or maybe it's a little bit early to tell?
Again, Peronism has been a presence in Argentine politics for, 60, 70 years. I think to call it the death knell of Peronism would be probably dangerous. It will come back in some shape or form. But what exactly that is, I don't know. And, as we see now, like all of these political coalitions are reformulating in different shapes and sizes. Juntos por el Cambio could merge with La Libertad Avanza. The Radicales, which are a moderate party within Juntos por el Cambio, are up for grabs and could end up being part of a larger Peronist coalition. I don't know. But things are in flux right now.
Jacob Sugarman, lifestyle editor, Buenos Aires Herald, writer at The Nation magazine. Thanks so much for catching us up on this. It's fascinating and a little bit disturbing. I got to be honest with you, but that's going around these days. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I'll talk to you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.